Welcome to this breakout. We are going to have a session about how the physical security is converging with the cyber security. My name is Nils, I'm from CSIS, but it's not me that we're talking about, it's Patrick who's going to have this session. I think, Patrick, you will take questions during your talk?
Yes, happy to take questions during the talk.
But then we will use the mic if there's any questions, and we will also pick up with questions after the talk. So without further ado, welcome, Patrick, and take it away.
Well, thank you for coming to the session. Thank you for coming to the event. Start off with, this is an eye chart, but this is some of my bio. Some of the key parts, several cybersecurity certifications, few too many, apparently I test well. I am the former principal investigator for the U.S. Department of Energy, National Cybersecurity Center, Department of Homeland Security, DOE partnership. I've started several companies, currently running a consulting firm, one of the original architects of the NERC-CIP standards in the U.S. I've been a former regulator for several years. So I've seen this from an asset owner perspective, a government perspective, and as a business owner. So in many ways, I get a nice round perspective of all these things. The only thing I haven't done is military, although I've worked with many different military organizations as a civilian contractor. What else? Some hardware and software companies in there too. Okay, currently my company is Ampere Industrial Security. We do security, physical and cyber, for big machines that go boom and kill people. And it's an important job. It's very difficult. We are peer services. We don't have hardware or software. We just have smart people that answer hard questions and keep bad things from happening. We do a lot of regulations and standards and frameworks. That's the primary motivator behind our organization. Is we're not just there to give them cybersecurity, we're there to give them some way to measure that against a standard, a framework, whatever that might be, so that they can obviously show their progress and their value to their shareholders, but measure where they are and see how effectively they're doing their cybersecurity as well. So we keep you ahead of your adversaries and your auditors. We have operations in US, Canada, and we're heading out next week to get the European branch stood up. Okay, chicken or egg? It's long been said that if you can have physical access to a system, game over. And this is true. If I can get my hands on your box, I own it. That's just a simple fact. We're finding that the reverse is now also true, because you don't get cybersecurity anymore. You don't get physical security anymore without cybersecurity. We used to have things like guards, gates, and guns. It was the standard method. Now, all the physical security stuff is in a virtual server somewhere in a rack. That's just how far we've progressed. It's not the same as it used to be. We'll talk a little about that. These two functions were often different. They were different disciplines. They're merging and converging in very real ways. And one of the best things, I use the example of like a heist movie. First thing they do is they go hack the CCTV camera system, right? So that no one can see it. They put it on a loop and they go in and do some sort of cyber attack as well. But when you have these hybrid level attacks and you think about these things in both spaces, both domains, physical and cyber, it makes a much clearer picture because they're no longer separate disciplines. Some of the physical threats today, very few organizations, despite how small and local you may think you are not. You have a global supply chain, and even if something says made in Denmark, it's likely just assembled in Denmark, made of foreign parts, made all over the planet. So there is no real localization anymore unless you grew it out of the ground and brought it from the farmer to your table. That's about it. If it's got a chipset in it, it was likely sourced somewhere else and assembled near you, if that, at best. So this is one of the physical threats we have, are the human beings making the things that go into the things that you buy and sell and use on a daily basis. Obvious geopolitical tensions. I'm going to be next week in Tallinn. It's pretty close to a war zone. This is an obvious one that shouldn't come with need too much explanation. Active war zones as well. This is a reality, unfortunately. Yes, it is 2023, but yes, we are also in a very tense state from countries taking over countries and actually shooting real physical bullets and tanks and things like that at each other, in addition to the cyber warfare components. Politics. I'm from the US. I understand just how shitty politics can be. It's a reality where I live. And we have a tendency to drag that across the planet with us, unfortunately. But politics can have a very real impact on everything that you do from a physical and cyber perspective. And they have a lot of interplay between the two. Politically motivated people will do both physical and cyber things to you. Disinformation and misinformation have real impacts as well. This affects the way people think to cause them to do physical actions in the cyber and real physical space world, meat space. Terrorism, things like supremacy, we've seen these, also motivate people to act in ways that are physical and cyber. Religious or belief-based attacks still happen all over the place, everywhere. And even things like at home, domestic and relationship issues. We've had people come in for a spouse and try to attack the spouse or their coworkers at offices, for example. So all the way down to your very own tiny little family. It comes all the way down to that nucleus as well. So the reality is, by the time it gets physical, it's pretty damn serious, right? It's no longer just some victimless crime of some cyber entity out there in the cloud somewhere, no idea where those packets go. It's usually affecting you in some very real, physical, visceral way. Okay, next thing. Everything is digital. We used to have analog things. Believe it or not, things like physical scales were used to weigh people before they would enter a facility as a part of a biometric. We've had all kinds of real physical things that were analog equipment. Everything you buy today is digital. Everything you have has a chipset in it. Your toothbrush has a chipset in it. Everything has a chipset. All the security equipment you buy, both physical and cyber, has a chipset. It's generating data. Now, it's not because we decided that we just wanted to make it digital. It actually is better. The ability for a scale to measure you at the micro level is much more accurate. For the biometrics to work, it's much more accurate. If I'm a guard and I see you every day, I can recognize you every day, but a biometric is going to be guaranteed in almost all cases to get that way more accurate without the guard changing, having a bad day, looking the other way, having to go to the bathroom, not paying attention. There's all kinds of things. The computers don't do that, the humans do. It's just a better approach. It's more accurate in many ways. So it's not a bad thing that it's digital, but it comes with risks. It carries this with it. Some of the biometrics we used to do, things like, I mentioned your face, they would recognize you. Things like fingerprint, we actually had like old school print fingerprints. And a human being would look at the fingerprints with like a scope and compare points. That was a real physical thing back in the day. We do this with a computer now, and it's ridiculously more accurate than it was with a human being. The degrees of accuracy are so much higher. How you walk. We can measure the way you step and actually accurately identify you just by the way you walk. If you've been into an airport lately and you've seen this kind of arc that you walk through, it's measuring the blood vessels in your forehead and mapping you based on the blood vessels in your forehead through a scan. Yes, this is a thing. In addition to things like, handwriting and all kinds of other stuff, cameras are everywhere. They're obvious, they're not obvious, they're tiny, you'll never see them, but they're everywhere, and what they can do is shocking. Yes, we can read your license plate from space. That's a reality. Yes, they're getting close to being able to actually do a retinal scan from space. I can put something in my backpack and scan everybody in this room facially, eyes, and in many other ways. Right now with the invisible camera technology that we already have right now. Things like card readers. So I've got to put maybe I've got like a substation or a pump house or some important piece of something in the middle of a big city, and I got to have a badge access reader. There are attacks where you basically can spam that thing and get overroll the buffer while you try certain cards to see if they work. Maybe you've stolen cards, maybe you've cloned cards. Anyone seen the Flipper Zero? There's lots of ways to do this, but you try to get the buffer to overrun before it can actually send its messages back so that you can hide inside the noise. There are devices now that actually have anti-spam techniques on these badge readers to detect against this. So the digital component there is much, much, much more useful. Things like keyed read. So if you use, for example, a Flipper Zero and you clone your key card for your room in Las Vegas, you will have security show up because they know you've cloned the card. How do they do that? It's the way the cards work, right? We're at the point now to where even if you clone something physical, we can tell in the digital space. Sensors, Rex is request to exit, temperature, light, motion, weight, force, all these things were originally analog sensors, they're now digital sensors. Everything is digital, chipset, data-based. Locks, we have digital locks. I have one in my house, I have one in my office, they're everywhere. They're great, you just use your phone, bing, you're in your place. Hasps are the little things where the lock opens up on the door, they're digital now too. So it actually opens the ability to open the door. So there's the lock and the hasp, both have to work in synchronicity to get the door to open. Light sensors, motion sensors, all those things. All right, physical is also cyber. So PACS is an acronym for Physical Access Control System. When you do a badge swipe, it goes back to a server somewhere that says, you're allowed access, you're not allowed access. That server is called a PACS server, Physical Access Control Server. It's a server. It's not a human. It's got a database. And it's got the standard SA accounts for SQL like anything else does. It's all just tech, but it's giving you physical access, or not. The workstation's used to control those systems. Just a workstation, like a regular Windows box, like anything else that you use every day. It's just IT. The badge printer, yeah, it's got firmware, so it's kind of like an OT thing, if that. It's more like an IoT thing, if anything, but it's still tech. It's still a chipset. It's not someone actually physically cutting a key for you. It's still technology. It still prints a badge. Digital keys, these are physical keys, right? They've actually got the little teeth on them and everything, but there's a component to it that's a chipset as well. So instead of having to go replace lock cores, place where you insert the key, I can just digitally deactivate your key. So without the actual physical key and the chipset, the lock won't work. It's actually really easy. It makes it much easier than going out and replacing lock cores. Think if you've got 100 facilities and you have a rogue employee that has access to all of them, you have to physically go out and change 100 lock cores. This way I can just disable you instantly from one central point using technology. Gates, locks, facial recognition, camera data analytics, we've talked about these things. All of the physical access controls that we use today are cyber controls. Innovation. We talked a little bit about this morning in the open session, the plenary session. What a fantastic talk. That was great. The impact-based investment, I'm just blown away. I love it. You can't stop innovation. I hear a lot of this, we're rushing too fast into this. Everything is so scary. Why don't we just tap the brakes and slow down? Or stop altogether, right? Good luck. Anybody have kids? First thing, say, don't do that. Immediately they all go off to do it. The minute you're not looking, that's it. They're on it. They're going to go do it. So even if you tell human beings to stop innovating, they will in fact innovate more. So if you embrace innovation, they will innovate more. The point is, they are going to innovate like it or not. So get on board, figure it out, and stop trying to slow this down and just help it get along in the right way. Make friends with it and teach it good manners, right? Mobile everything. Everybody in the physical security space has an iPad. So they can monitor their physical access from an iPad or from their phone. Because most of the physical security people move around a lot. So even those that used to just sit at a desk and there'd be like a whole bunch of screens and okay, there's an entry there, so-and-so, zoom in, make sure that's something going on, or just check that perimeter, there's no guard there, look over there. There are actually now people basically with iPads that roam around that do that all from a mobile device instead of sitting in a desk somewhere. They still have the desk and still have all the monitors. But in addition to that, they're completely mobile enabled, 100%, all the way down to like watch apps and augmented reality goggles for certain facilities. So they can see facial recognition on you, the last entry that you had, and I can see that for some reason you two haven't had any interaction the last time and you came from a facility far away that's in a hot region. Why are you two talking? I can see that now with augmented reality, believe it or not, in the physical security world. Cloud. If everything is digital, all my locks, all my hasps, all my cameras, all my gates, all my entry points, if all that's digital, that data's got to go somewhere. And I'm not sending it to the data center. There's not enough space in there. It's going to go to the cloud. So all of that physical security stuff, all that data about my operation, about all of you, it's somewhere in the cloud. That's just how it is. It's a bunch of servers somewhere, taking up space and blinking lights. In addition, if I wanted to do all this really awesome analytics like I just talked about, there's actually companies that do this better than me. I'm not a specialist at doing that kind of analytics on those kinds of behaviors. So I just hire that out. It's a service that someone else provides, and I just give them access to my stuff in the cloud, just like any other service. You're doing this now with HR, with sales, with procurement. It's just another service, like anything else. And of course, the technology, as we talked about, it's vanishing. There's going to be embedded cyber and physical technology in almost everything. Like your badge, for example, to use it at the office, we now have badges that are biometrically authenticated. So the badge doesn't even light up to work until you put your thumbprint on it and authenticate to the badge. Then the badge authenticates you to the door. So it's merging down to the device level at the human interface point, all the way there. Size is going to get smaller. Yeah, eventually this is just going to become invisible. You won't even notice, right? It's just going to be built into the fabric of what you do every day. So that's should just be expected. Just checking the time. Okay. All right. When you typically think of physical security, you think about something from 1985, most likely. You're thinking about a guard somewhere. You're thinking about like some dude maybe with a dog for like high security places, right? That's about it. And they may have some camera, they say enhance, right? Which never really happens. So that's typically where we think about this. This is so far light years in front of that mindset now. And tomorrow will look even more converged. So what we're still seeing is this legacy organizational structure to manage this technology. So if this is your organization and you're still stuck in 1985, wake up and move forward, because this is the challenge. You have to manage your physical access security just like it's IT. It needs the same uptime as any of your other critical aspects. So anything else that's a high impact facility, a business impact assessment critical, crown jewel analysis function, all of those elements, if you're not factoring physical security into that, especially if you've got any sort of critical physical operations, you're missing out. So look at how you're structuring this from an organizational standpoint, not just where does the leadership sit, but where do the budgets come from? Physical security is usually terribly underfunded. Now, there's all kinds of great ways to do this. You can make CISOs, there's chief physical security officers now. The highly functioning organizations that do this well, they've got a CISO and a CPSO that report to a CSO. The CSO sits on a peer level with the rest of the executives and has direct access to the board. Simply put, if you can do that, great on you. Most organizations are still stuck in 1985, maybe 1990 or 2000, and they don't. It's usually stuck in somewhere like facilities, which does like the sweeping of the floors and producing of the coffee in the machines, this kind of thing. Builds a new wall when they need a new wall in the facility, or replaces a door, paints the parking spaces, or it's in property management, right? These are not the right places for your IT-based physical security components. You have to change the mindset to tomorrow on how you're managing these assets, because it's now all one thing. Data is everywhere. We are converging, as I mentioned, physical and cybersecurity. The convergence of this data is super powerful. So I've got some facilities. I've got a couple of electric companies that are doing this in particular. They've got some critical operations near defense installations or other places like that. And they can tell between when I log into my system, if I'm at this workstation, and I'm also logged into this workstation at the same time in two different physical locations, because it knows where I badged. And if I badged here and I'm logged into this one, and I didn't badge in here, but I'm logged into this one, that's a problem, right? Or I've badged into one facility and I badged into a second facility without having the time to get between the two distances. So if it's 100 kilometers and I badge in minutes apart, there's no way I could physically get from point A to point B. And that's analytics. That's not just a guard or somebody watching, right? This is cyber. It's not just physical. So that kind of convergence of physical and cyber can give you enormous amounts of behavioral analytics to enhance your internal security functions, even external security functions. Now, if you add enough other operational data, for example, the applications that you use in addition to that, so stack the physical location, the login data, and the applications that you use in a secondary nature, that can give you an even richer set of data to understand what is actually happening, what should be happening, what should not be happening. So when you take all that and you synthesize those key components that are useful for you, that gives you a really, really solid picture. Now, this isn't to monitor you like Big Brother. Like I say, pick the key things that you need to know that are very important just to make sure you do the security stuff. If you use it to monitor beyond that, you're just going to start getting into some privacy violations and many other things that make your employees very uncomfortable. So you got to balance this and not take it over the top. And in some places, you'll actually violate legislation around how you deal with this data. So just understand this is extremely powerful. It's also a very slippery slope because it's God-level power once you analyze all this stuff together in one set. Just use it wisely. With great power comes great responsibility. We've all heard the phrase. But it is enormously powerful. But just focus on the critical things that you need to know. Start small, work up from there, and be mindful of what you can violate when you start taking this too far. But it is insanely powerful. Some of the other benefits, incident response. Those two teams working together in an incident are very, very, very key. Because a lot of cases, we don't just have a cyber incident. We have a physical incident as well. One of the examples I use is we have a client that's a water company, and they're a water company in a very large city. They had some break-ins to some of the pumping facilities. There's digital stuff in there that runs all the pumps and runs all the chlorination and the filtration. They don't have physical things anymore. It's all run by computers. So when the people broke in, they vandalized the wall and spray painted some things and set a small fire in one of the other ones. But the question came up from local law enforcement, said, how do you know they didn't touch any of the cyber things that were in there? And they're like, crap, we don't know. Like, well, what would happen if they touched the cyber things in there? Bad stuff? Like, can you confirm that they didn't touch the cyber things so bad stuff won't happen? Brilliant idea. What they did is they issued, to get a work order to go to the facility to do work on a cyber system in the facility, it comes with a barcoded tamper tape sticker. And the port used to plug into the device to do the work, you put the little sticker over the port. So all the ports on the device are covered with these little tamper tape stickers. So the next time someone broke in, they could physically walk in and inspect every single port to see if the port had been tampered with. Incident response was in seconds. The physical security team thought of this, not the cyber team. Because the physical security team had to go out with the cyber team, wait for them to log in, check all the settings, make sure no one logged into that machine and did any bad stuff to cause bad things to happen to the water. And the physical team was sitting there twiddling their thumbs thinking, we got to stop this. This is nonsense. We got to ride around with these guys all day long to check all these facilities for a couple of weeks. This is nuts. So their solution was tamper tape. Worked like a charm. Literally minutes to do incident response on a facility. So merging those two in an incident can be tremendously valuable. They think different ways. They have different value to bring. So it's key. In addition to things like convergence in a SOC, if they're getting into your data center to stop your CCTV, they're likely going to do something cybery as well. Those two things often go hand in hand. It's not just in the movie world, it is in the real world as well. So things like diversions, two-front attacks, cross-domain attacks, these are realities in our world today. Physical and cyber are converged, so physical and cyber things will happen in tandem, or one will be used as a diversion for the other. Look here while I steal your wallet, kind of things. So typically things like if you see physical access intrusions, you should be checking for cyber events at the location where you had physical access intrusions. And the reverse. If you have a cyber intrusion at a facility, the physical team should be alerted. Go check it out. And if you have equipment there, that's cameras, all the other digital stuff, you can typically get a pretty good picture of it before you send the team in, so they can know what they're walking into. Safety goes up as well. So all these things, as they converge, become tremendously valued together versus just in these separate disciplines. Yeah, and respective active coverage during active incidents, depending upon where you are in the situation you're in. I've been in some countries that are either in a war zone or have a lot of domestic unrest. In those situations, you need both teams working together because you have to provide physical coverage for the cyber folks going in to do the work in the facilities, and conversely, they have to protect those physical folks from a cyber perspective because the adversary is after the physical protectors as well. So this feedback loop of protection is actually key depending upon where you have operations. Okay, some examples of convergence. As I mentioned, a badge read compared to the system login. Should they be in the facility where they're logging in? Is that access appropriate, first of all? Is the badge access in a place where they've not logged in? Are those two things in different locations, right? That's important to know. And these are things that are not that hard to figure out. These are literally logged events in both systems that are just standard, native functions of both operations, just converging that data in a way to know, right? It's time-based. Critical location versus critical commands. This is the additional layer of the application access. We deal in my world again is industrial. There are certain commands that are legitimate commands, but you send them at the wrong time in the wrong location and you can cause things to go boom. So if I've got a person in the wrong location sending the wrong commands, that's an important thing to know, right? It's not just, and you can base that on physical location and login and application access as well. License plate compared with badge and read login. We do this a lot where we can see if the vehicle they typically drive is the one that's in the parking lot when they logged in at that facility. And again, some of this is for critical facilities or critical locations. This might not be for large headquarters. Depends on your scale and your operation. So your mileage may vary. A badge read and geographic distance between 2 points. I mentioned that earlier where, if I badge in one place and badge in another place and I can't get between those 2 points. This is a key one. People miss it all the time, is for physical access control systems, using things like ITSMF or the IT Service Management Framework. We've been managing IT for 50 plus years. This is now a science, right? It's just on a crank. You just do these things, good stuff comes out of your IT. It's not that hard anymore. Bring your physical access control system stuff into that same world. It should be managed just like any other IT asset. Just bring it into the fold like it is. Cross-discipline threat sharing, your physical and your cyber teams should be getting together and talking about the threats that you see from the outside to your operation. If you're not looking outside, first things first, if you're not locking your doors and windows, don't worry about threat information sharing. You're going to waste your time and waste your money on some things that are not useful to you. Start with the basics. If you're at a maturity place where you're doing threat intel, those two teams should be talking to each other and definitely sharing information about the physical threats they see, the cyber threats they see, and how those two things might intersect. And then again, the holistic security approach for the organization, this goes all the way up to the top. Where does the physical security sit? Where does the cybersecurity sit? And do those people sit at a place in the organization to have meaningful conversations between each other, impact on their organization's cross-organizational structures, and then do they have a common leadership above them that reports the right things to the board at the right time? And then enhanced safety in OT and ICS environments, as I mentioned. Knowing the convergence of this data doesn't just give you, should this person have access or should they be doing the things they're doing? Are we blocking the right things? It also can help you in safety situations. Or are the people in the place they should be? Are they all there? Did we get them all out? These kinds of things as well. So you have a bigger human safety value to it beyond just, keeping people in and out of systems. Okay, summary. Physical and cyber threats, technologies, practices, all of it, it's converging. It's almost to where it's not different disciplines anymore. There are some uniquenesses to both sides, but the amount of overlap in that Venn diagram is enormous. It's much more than it used to be, and it's converging and converging more and more and more to the center together. Physical security practices and mindsets need to change. They got to keep pace with today. This is a very different world. So if you've got some ancient, crusty old law enforcement person running your security, and if all they can think about is guards, gates, and guns, they're a dinosaur. This is now all IT, AI, whiz kid stuff. It is not the same physical security as it used to be. That game is over. The attackers are well beyond that. InfoSec, Operational security, OTSec, IT, they can all assist with successful approaches. They need to be sharing, they need to be talking, they need to be put in each other's jobs for a while to figure out what the other person was meaning when they said the thing they said. Have them understand their worlds in more meaningful ways. Cross-train, have those conversations, and then consider to maximize the benefit of what I call holistic convergence. Data analytics, threat management, incident response, budgets, commonality of technologies. If I'm buying one piece of tech for me and you can get on it, let's get a volume license and get both organizational units the same tech, right? All these things can benefit from the convergence of these technologies and these practices. Okay, that's me. I'm not hard to find. I'm on Mastodon and Blue Sky and Twitter, whatever's left of Twitter, because it's a hellhole anymore. Yeah. No, yeah, whatever, yeah, X, whatever Elon wants to tank it and call it tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, any questions? Fire away. Microphone, hold on. Yeah.
Oh, God. Apologize for my voice. Great, as usual, to listen to you. Thank you for a good presentation. One of the things that we're actually discussing a lot here in Denmark, and I'm pretty sure you've also met it a lot at your customers, is this referring to the right people and having the right mandate. Mm-hmm. And we're still kind of trying to get cybersecurity there. What is your advice for companies? And I know it's a big thing in Denmark because the companies are not as big as in the US. What should the people responsible for that do? What is your advice for everyone else to actually follow that?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question and a difficult one to answer. I have seen organizations, when they do put security together under one discipline, it becomes a bigger issue set. So you can report more meaningful metrics upstream to the organization. It can help you get more visibility at the executive layer or the ownership layer. It really depends on how much they care, because if they don't care, then your first job is making them care, which is a different discussion altogether. So that's a tough one to do. I don't have a perfect answer for that, other than I can say convergence does help. Data about how your operation is doing, metrics, standards to show that we adhere to these controls. These controls are improving over time. So when they want to see where their money is going in that part of the organization, you can show real value and real progress in those spaces. Otherwise, you're just kind of guessing. But usually management wants to see metrics, KPIs, money spent, and not just are we saving the organization money, but more, are we preventing loss? That's usually where cybersecurity or physical security comes in for the budget side of things. And they speak business, they don't speak security at all. Yeah. Did you have anything to add?
I've been a board member for many years. So one thing that is really important is making sure that people in charge of cybersecurity speak boardish. Yeah. If they don't have that ability to speak out their problems, their ideas, and the effects of what they're doing in a language that is recognized by the board, you will not get anywhere. And even if you put someone in the executive team and label them, say so, they will not have the opportunity to talk to the board, real board, because they don't have that right language. So, and not even the language might be adequate. They need to present it in a way that us old, male, pale, and stale guys will understand.
Yes.
So work with that.
Other questions?
Thank you. It's quite obvious that you're in a Danish environment right here in the Nordics, and
I have Danish clients, so at least I have some understanding of the culture.
You're coming from a US background, and how much would you put that national discrepancy between a Nordic high trust society where physical security is that we don't even have, in Norway, for instance, where I'm from, we even have guns.
Yeah.
And bridging that gap sometimes can be quite difficult because of the national kind of trust we have here, right?
That's a good question. The difference between how you operate here at home in your culture, because all of this has to be culturally context, right? It's got to be wrapped in the culture of where you are. If you have operations in Africa, it's going to look very different. If you have operations anywhere near Russia, it's going to be very different. Operations in China, it's going to be very different. So one thing that's interesting about Denmark is you are also the headquarters for many other global organizations. So you have a much greater reach than just in your own small space. So I would say the difference is it's more of a, I don't want to say dichotomy, but it's more of a spectrum. So locally, you have to balance for the cultural base. A lot of the things I just mentioned around the type of data you collect, our neighbor Canada, absolutely against the law. No way could you do this kind of data collection. In the US, all bets are off. We're a cowboy. Collect all the data you want. Use it however you want, in even awful and terrifying ways. So it always has to fit the cultural context. So for your local operations, those may be very different than your operations abroad that you have a corporate headquarters for. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of the global context
Yeah.
plays a lot more because people can fly in, right?
Yes. Yes.
There's no real like physical security doesn't have those, as you say, those gates anymore because somebody can come in from anywhere, right?
Yes.
And you're a big, I don't know, shipping company, healthcare company
Yes.
with global impact.
Yes. And they may not do physical damage. They may just get physical access to do some cyber reconnaissance.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. One last thing before I go. The spirit of collaboration, let's all work on this male, pale, and stale issue. We got to get some more diversity in this. We can't solve this problem with just a bunch of crusty white guys.
Do we have time for one more? Or is the time?
One, yeah, we can have one more
One
quick
more?
question.
Okay.
Something that you said made me remember a case in the United States. I believe it was in the Boston area where there was a company that does surgical robots, and cybersecurity is very important for surgical robots. But they had a physical security situation where someone was able to come in physically because the trust mindset, it was the trust mindset of people can come into the office, and this person who was a spy camped in a conference room that was empty and broke in through the Wi-Fi and they were able to steal a large amount of information. So it's a great example of what you said, that although the trust may be there, it creates a cyber opening that people can walk through.
Absolutely. Great point. Awesome. Thank you all so much. I hope to have conversations over lunch and breaks, please.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.